Number 3. Agent Carter, Season 2. We pick up this season with Peggy tying up a loose end from last season, the capture of Dottie Underwood, played once again by, Be Still My Heart, Bridget Regan. Before Peggy can interrogate Dottie on her apparent theft of a lapel pin, the SSR's new chief, Jack Thompson, sends her out to L.A. to assist Daniel Sousa, who is now chief of the West Coast wing of the SSR, in the investigation of a woman frozen to death in a lake. Daniel and Peggy had that unspoken affection vibe going on last year, but now Sousa is set to propose to his pretty nurse girlfriend, Violet. Peggy is also reunited with Mr. Jarvis and meets Mrs. Jarvis as she settles into one of Howard Stark's mansions for her stay. Mr. Jarvis, of course, is eager to get back in the thick of things for another adventure. While investigating the odd murder, Peggy meets Dr. Wilkes, and the two take a shine to one another. One of my biggest gripes with last season was that the misogyny on display was pretty heavy-handed. This season doesn't revel in the discrimination of the period. Peggy is finally considered an ace agent in her own right without having to take the office lunch order. In the same way, a few brief scenes early in the show reveal some of the unfortunate racism of the period without beating us over the head with it, as to make the show an unpleasant experience. The villain of the piece is Whitney Frost, a beautiful actress and wife of an aspiring senator that has connections to a powerful council called the Arena Club. She's really the brains behind the two of them and has the grand ambition to harness an energy known as zero matter. Now, if this season has any flaw, it's that zero matter isn't really the most compelling MacGuffin. While trying to steal a sample of the zero matter, an accident causes both she and Dr. Wilkes to be affected in different ways. Hayley Atwell has claimed that Peggy Carter had the first interracial kiss in comics, so in that tradition it's fitting that she have something of a romance with Wilkes. It doesn't go much further than a kiss, however, before Wilkes is turned into a living ghost. Dominic Cooper makes a welcome return as Howard Stark, now a film director in his spare time. He puts his considerable intellect to work at figuring out how to cure Dr. Wilkes. Meanwhile, Whitney is given the strange powers of absorbing people into herself. It leaves her with a growing black scar. Whitney, of course, is based on the Iron Man villain Madame Mask, and I was a little disappointed that they used the character here instead of a potential Iron Man film. She's Madame Mask in name only, though. She isn't even called Madame Mask during the series. I was happy to see some of Peggy's backstory coming to light. She was engaged to be married, only to give up that life to follow her brother's urging to become an agent after he's killed in battle. We get to see Whitney's backstory as a parallel, but it's a bit more cliché, where she grew up with a trampish mother who encouraged her to use her looks instead of her brain, despite her genius-level intellect. Meanwhile, Jack Thompson gets sweet-talked by his former mentor and War Department official, Vernon Masters, played by Kurtwood Smith, who is working with the Council. Hayley Atwell has some great action scenes throughout, as well as some humorous ones, such as one involving the returning Ray Wise as the head of Roxxon. Mr. Jarvis also gets a funny bit of foreshadowing as his voice adorns the Stark Mansion burglar alarm, causing him to remark of his distaste of spending eternity as a disembodied voice. Agent Rose returns from last season. She and scientist Samberly make for some amusing comrades in arms. During her first encounter with Frost, Peggy gets sent over a rail which causes her to be impaled. Sousa's nurse girlfriend Violet patches her up, but sensing the love vibes between the two, she breaks things off with Sousa. While Peggy is on the mend, she breaks Dottie out of prison, pairing her with Mr. Jarvis to humorous effect, as she attempts to steal a sample of Frost's blood. She ends up getting captured by Masters and delivered to Frost. Whitney's shady spouse becomes a battered husband in effect, eventually turning on her, but Frost ends up killing him and half the council, establishing herself as the new leader. She also seeks aid from a crime boss named Manfredi. After a rather stereotypical introduction, he turns out to be a pretty amusing character. Peggy and Mr. Jarvis set out to rescue Dottie, who eventually escapes once again free and clear, like last season. But in the meantime, Whitney kidnaps Dr. Wilkes to try and take his portion of zero matter for herself, and shoots Anna in the process. She survives, but at the cost of never being able to have children. Which to me is a little odd, since Peggy was the one impaled with a steel pipe through her abdomen, yet she's back in business after 48 hours, none the worse for wear. Anna's injuries seem much more severe in comparison. Props to James D'Arcy as he gets some good dramatic moments here. Mr. Jarvis is out for revenge and attempts to kill Frost. Only problem is, she can't be killed. He and Peggy are captured and knocked unconscious, which leads to a goofy but thoroughly enjoyable dream sequence based on a 1940s musical number. This is the only cameo for Angie, who was a regular last season. It's disappointing they couldn't get her a bigger role this season, but it was good to see her again, however briefly. Peggy and Mr. Jarvis escape the van and have a good heart-to-heart talk in the desert. In the meantime, Jack and Sousa join forces with Vernon to attempt to destroy Frost. The plan doesn't go quite according to plan when Jack double-crosses Vernon, leaving him at Frost's mercy. Peggy tries to rescue Wilkes, but he declines her help and confronts Frost, basically exploding in front of her. She absorbs all the zero matter that he possessed and has become even more powerful. The team planned to trap her by zapping her with the returning Howard Stark's gamma cannon, which would release the zero matter back into the rift from whence it came. The plan works with a little last-minute heroics from Sousa. In the end, all is well with the Jarvises, as well as Dr. Wilkes, who accepts a job with Howard Stark. As for Whitney, she ends up in a padded cell. Before she could head back to New York, sparks finally fly for Peggy and Sousa. It would be interesting to find out if they ended up together. In The Winter Soldier, Peggy says Cap saved her husband's life, and it's curious to see if they would work that fact in retroactively. The season ends on the cliffhanger of Chief Thompson being shot and apparently killed by a mystery man to steal a file he had. Sadly, poor ratings doomed the show, and not halfway through the short season, ABC began to burn the show off 2 episodes a week, a sure sign of cancellation. Sure enough, the axe fell, leaving these questions all unanswered. Well, while not overly pleased with the first season, I for one really enjoyed this season. It had a bit of a lighter and humorous tone without wallowing too greatly in the unfortunate prejudices of the day. I was glad to see Dottie Underwood returning, and it looked like she would have been a frequent adversary, if not frenemy, of Peggy going forward. I was also very happy with Wynne Everett's performance. She made for a strong yet sympathetic villain. She had just the right haunted look to make her performance all the more captivating. I'd like to have seen her return at some point had the show continued. I really loved the period setting. It's just a fun era to have a spy series set in. All the period music was also very enjoyable. I liked the sci-fi direction the show took on this season, but it's also a negative. As I said before, the Zero Matter storyline really isn't that compelling. We find out next to nothing about the Zero Matter other than the freakish things it does to Wilkes and Frost. And then it just goes back where it came from in the end. Rumor has it it's supposed to tie into the Doctor Strange film, but that's to be determined as of now. And lastly, I didn't really like the lack of Captain America references. I'm sure they wanted Peggy to move on and be her own woman and find love again, but this is still set only about 2 years after Steve's alleged death. Granted, I wouldn't expect Peggy still pining over Steve come 1954, but they could have just thrown a reference or two in there for good measure. While I can't say I expected this show to run 7 or 8 seasons, I do think there is more to say with Peggy Carter, and hopefully, the powers that be find a way to tell more of her story in the future. I'm giving Agent Carter Season 2 4.5 stars out of 5. This is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.